Hello, Windows and Linux, why can't they just get along? That's our question today. The title of our webinar, as you'd have seen, is Making IT Work in the Real World. And the real world for you probably involves both of the operating systems. Now, the question is, does that fall to you to make them work well? Does that fall to the vendors? Well, we've got some people who are very well qualified to talk about that today. But first of all, I'd like to welcome you to our new studio. Isn't it fantastic? Over here in the UK, we don't make the hardware or the software anymore, but when it comes to good office furniture to put it on, there's nobody better than us. Now, the interface, for those of you who are not regulars, you will see that there's a tab to ask questions. Please do ask questions. If you get your questions in early, then you've got more chance of me being able to put them to the guys today. Ask anything you want. Stick your name on it. It makes it more personal, and then you recognise when your question's coming up. You can download this presentation to look at in another window. You can get the bios of the people involved. And this being an open source kind of webcast, there's a lot of technical people involved or contributing a little bit today. And also for the feedback afterwards. We do more of what you like and less of what you don't like. So please tell us what you like and don't like about this. Now, let's get on with who we got today. So my name's Tim Phillips, as you know. From our old mates, Freeform Dynamics, we have Tony Locke. Welcome, Tony.
Thank you very much, Tim.
Tony, for people who are watching on a laptop screen, what's on your novelty tie today?
It's Snoopy with his flying hat on there and his scarf waving in the wind. Just to get that, let's fly through this quite easily.
Light, but somehow yet serious. Now, also from Novell, we have in the studio with us Steve Harris. Welcome, Steve.
Tim, how are you doing?
Not too bad. Now, when this all comes from an agreement that you made with Microsoft back in November 2006, doesn't it? At which time I remember the register said it's like Bambi meets Godzilla. So that means that today you're our Bambi.
I'll try not to skate on thin ice.
Okay, that's terrific. Also joining us from the United States by phone today, and you'll be hearing from them a little bit later, are Frank Rigo from Novell and Jose Thomas from Microsoft. That means that Jose has to be Godzilla today, so let's see how that works. First of all, though, to explain what the problem is making Windows and Linux work together. Tony, over to you.
Thank you very much, Tim. So I'm going to go through, as always, some feedback that we've got from the register audience, telling us what they're doing in the real world, as much as anybody's in the real world, instead of each of us being in our own versions of the real world, to see what's going on out there, what are the issues that people have, what are they looking for in terms of help and ways forward to get through the maze that is the world. So going to go through a few things here, and it's almost obligatory that we start off with this first slide going through, well, what are the typical challenges that everybody faces out there in the real world?
You're going to say do more for less again, aren't you?
I'm going to desperately try not to.
Please do.
It's on the slide, so I thought I'd try not to say it. But the pressure is out there for people to actually keep on delivering ever better services to their business users more efficiently, more effectively, which unfortunately often means, if not for less, then certainly for, no more. So keep it going, keep doing everything you have to, and help us move forward at ever increasing pace. Beyond that, there's the old chestnuts of, minimise risk, help us do what we want to do, and of course, as your audience out there know better than anybody, IT skills, the pressure is on those guys to keep on doing ever cleverer things that help the business just basically function better and support its customers more efficiently going forward. Which, of course, lends the question, well, OK, what are the appropriate platforms to do that with? From the beginning of computing, we started off with proprietary platforms. That's all that existed. And then what, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, however many years ago you count, this thing called open source appeared. And it appeared with quite a bang, but frankly, not too many people were aware of, well, what is it? Is it just Linux? Is there more to open source than Linux? And then, well, OK, it's out there. Can we actually use it in real business to deliver these important services? And, yep, there's been a gestation period during which time it has begun to be deployed in real live systems. And, of course, beyond that, there's ever the question, well, okay, if we are going to do something new for the business, these finance guys keep asking us to make a business case for it. So what's the reason for doing this? Can you give us some financial reasons to move forward? And clearly, one of the things that open source has going for it is that, at least according to the finance guys, it's free in many elements. Of course, we all know that nothing's free. But the question then is, well, okay, what's the case to actually support this? You know, how can we get support? Is there reliable support available to take things forward? So moving on to the next slide, and as we can see, there's actually zero time lag here with the slides, which has got me quite confused as well for a change. What's happening with people? We polled the audience, the guys out there, at the beginning of the year, end of last year, to say, what's your perception of the various platforms that people are commonly using? And as you can see from the slide here, the platforms that have really got huge majorities of people saying that it's a platform that they are committed heavily to going forward, rather than this dread term, it's a legacy system, are essentially the new versions of Windows, Linux, and flying right out there are these things called virtualized systems. And what guys are they going to run on? Is it going to be on Windows? Is it going to be on Linux? Is it going to be on both of them? But they are the areas that people are really looking to actually carry the business forward into tomorrow, as well as keeping today going for it. Unix, yep, there's a lot of it out there still. There are slightly larger proportions of people who see Unix as being a legacy platform. Whether that translates into the real world, anything actually happening, is heavily debatable, because this is all about perception.
It's a very small proportion of people that are saying
Absolutely.
Unix is becoming important. People have got it, and there's a lot of people still committed to it.
Yeah, it's one of those things that people know about, as opposed to something that's beginning to push forward and have a really greater effect. The real one there that's got that, it's becoming important to us, are these virtualized platforms. And as you can equally see, there's almost nobody who sees that as being legacy, which is both good and bad, because it means that it's still young, and people want to know, how can we keep that moving forward? What's in there to help us support that? And how do we keep the balance going as we move forward on all of these things? So the real heart of it comes down to, well, actually, what works for your business? What does your business need to do? What do people have to do out there to support their users, to give them the services that they want when they want them? We can see quite clearly that virtualization is definitely happening. But again, feedback we've taken from the audience shows us that the organisations that have gone heavily into, in particular, server consolidation efforts are beginning to see now, well, okay, we've taken that first step, and now we're beginning to run into challenges actually managing this stuff going forward, both from a process side of view and a technology side of view. And we're not sure how to support this going forward day by day for progressively longer periods of time. How can we keep that platform moving forward? And again, some research that we carried out at the beginning of this year shows us that when it comes to Linux, despite Linux having huge amounts of visibility in the IT world, actually the number of people that are skilled in actually deploying Linux and keeping it running out there in this real world, not that great. There are far more people with Windows support, even potentially with the proprietary Unix platform support, than actually have Linux in their portfolio and armory. And we've had feedback from the audience that it's sometimes difficult to get hold of people with the Linux skills that they need to actually do some of this new stuff and push forward, deploying platforms to support the business needs.
Steve, bring you in on that one. You're releasing software into an environment where there's still a huge skills shortage.
It's an interesting point, because I've often talked to senior executives within our customer base around this very subject, because it's one of the biggest concerns that they have, particularly if they've been a proprietary Unix shop in the past. And one major bank I talked to, we asked them really to understand from their engineering teams what skill sets they had. And although there'd been no formal training on Linux within their administration team, what they discovered when they polled them was that they were all Linux users at home. And they hadn't actually admitted to the fact that they were using Linux, because ultimately their livelihood relies on their Unix skills. But at home, they were playing with it on a regular basis. So it became an interesting conclusion, because they realized that the skills gap wasn't as large, when they did a private poll, shall we say. to perhaps their public representation of that skill capability.
But still, if those people are going to get involved in large company support activities, they need to get trained up rather than say, I've got a good general knowledge of it because I've been using it at home.
Absolutely, and I think part of being a Linux distribution vendor is delivering those services around the support and the training that actually enable these guys to become skilled up quickly. And what we're finding is that the gap to migrate from perhaps a proprietary Unix platform to a Linux platform is not a big skills gap. So we've noticed that people who do actually migrate off of Unix, particularly things like Solaris, etc., they are actually migrating to Linux in almost 70% of the cases, because they feel that the skills differential is very small. And the two platforms that are growing right now are Linux and Windows. So it's usually coming down to a choice of, well, do we go towards Windows, or do we migrate our application onto Linux? And often that's a technical and an internal debate that they have based on skills and high availability requirements and this sort of thing.
Yeah, if anyone's got a point about that, actually, it would be interesting to find out what the audience thinks. Are you suffering from the shortage of skills in that Linux environment? Because maybe we can sort of speak more to that later. So please let us know. Tony, I broke your flow.
That's fine. One of the things that we have found is that, outside of those really large enterprise customers that have just been described, when you get down into the mid-market, those access to Linux skills does drop off quite dramatically, because there are fewer IT guys out there anyway. And they're much more of an IT generalist rather than a specialist in any one particular area. So they are probably having to look after Windows. They may be having to look after some Unix machines. They may now be having to start looking at supporting some Linux workloads as well, and perhaps having something else in the portfolio as well, whether it be a VMS machine or an AS400 or System I, whatever they're called these days, because names change so often. They have to look after everything, and possibly looking after the desktop side as well, which makes the issue of support absolutely essential to them. Businesses want to minimize risk. And that means that whatever they're deploying to support their business systems, they want to make sure they've got good support, so that if they have challenges, that there's somebody that they can ring up on the phone that can help them work through whatever it is they need to get through. And that's proving to be something that more and more people are looking at, obviously in the connection of both Linux, virtualized platforms and Windows, and getting them all to marry together to keep things moving forward.
Yeah.
And I agree that there is a challenge perhaps in the mid-market because of the available skills.
Yep.
But for that reason, every time we provide a subscription to SUSE Linux, we also provide integral to that subscription a free online training course. Every single subscription gets that by default. So that's one way that we can help populate skill sets into the marketplace. Whether you're a big enterprise or the smallest operation, you still have take advantage of that, and it doesn't actually cost you any additional fee, or there's nothing associated with having to travel somewhere to get to a training class.
And it's green.
Okay, but let's not get hung up on this, because we need to move one step further, because it's not just Windows, it's not just Linux, it's both of them together.
One thing on here that, again, we get feedback time after time after time, and that's that licensing is difficult, and understanding of software licensing is more than difficult. It can be headache forming, and people are looking for help in actually making sure that what they have, they've got properly licensed, and they're not paying too much for it, they're not paying too little for it, that they are working legally, and that's there. And there are licenses involved in the open source world as well as in the proprietary world, and organizations, IT guys in particular, want help in understanding what's the best licensing model to deploy. And that applies in spades when it comes to looking at virtualized platforms as well, when everybody's scratching their heads wondering what's going on, guys. So what can we see on the next slide? Do people have any tips to actually help support Linux and the ongoing management in daily deployment of open source platforms going forward? And frankly, it's the sort of things that you'd expect people to say. And that's, make sure you've got access to the right skills in place. Make sure that you've got people trained as much as you can, and that you've got those support people on hand to help you smooth out any wrinkles that may occur in daily life. Preferably make sure that you've got some idea of, again, properly configured platforms to deploy before you get to deploy them. And again, easier said than done, perhaps with the pressure to do things. The testing time that never really was there has got compressed even further. So we want to make sure that things are out there. And again, it comes down to not only training the support people, but actually training the end users of the applications so that they know what to do to take, again, the pressure off those IT support guys going forward to make sure that they can do that and get out there. And so it then comes down to looking at the mid-sized in particular, what's going on. There are organisations that have fed back to us, your readers, the viewers of this webinar, telling us that their IT organisations are frankly overstretched. They're under pressure. They're under more pressure than they've ever been. We say this time after time, but it's very much the case. IT, the pressure is on to do more, partly because businesses are becoming ever more dependent on IT to begin with, but also in this time of economic turmoil, organisations are actually looking to IT to do more, to actually help the business, grow, deliver new services, do new things, without, again, perhaps adding some of the otherwise capital-intensive overheads that would have been in more traditional service delivery mechanisms. So that the pressure really is on there. And again, that server proliferation is happening, even with the consolidation projects. Once people have undergone consolidation, there's this proliferation of virtualized platforms when it's even easier to deploy more of them and struggling with actually managing them going forward. And then in mixed environments, keeping your skills up to date, making sure that there are no rough edges to be ironed over, to keep the platforms working, minimising the risk, making sure that the business gets what it needs to do its daily operations. And that means that it all comes down to a question of choice, and that choice is important because that's what businesses live on. They want to do what's best for them. They want to choose the best platform, running the best applications to do the services that they need to actually take their business going forward. And for that, they clearly want support, because support is all about that minimising risk so that they can do this in the comfort that the business is going to be safe as they move forward.
Yeah, and now that choice, because the messages that are coming through here from us asking, are you short of the skills? And it's an overwhelming, yes, we're short of the skills. So basically what we're saying is, people need some help here. This is complicated.
Yeah, IT's always been complicated. And it's what's the background that people have. Linux and open source are still relatively new. So even the people who are most trained on that may not have, the decades and decades of experience of supporting it in real world. So there's still lots of scope for people to get more support, even with those Linux specialists that are out there. And there are not as many of those Linux specialists as there are for other platforms.
Okay.
And so it's trust. How can we move forward? What can we do to actually change things?
All right. Thanks, Tony. That's you, isn't it? That's your slides.
I believe so.
Good. Okay. Thanks. Well, at which point, then, Steve, we need to bring you in for this, because also I noticed back in 2006, the Register said, one of the things about Microsoft's attitude to Linux and how it's going to work with Linux, we were all looking at it like we watched Lost on television. We're trying to work out what's going on and what does it actually mean. So you're the man for this.
Well, I think I can certainly help clarify some misconceptions around that. But importantly, I've also brought some associates from Microsoft along as well, because I think it's much better to hear some of these points coming from them, because they're able to speak with true conviction over their intentions and what they've been doing to collaborate with Novell over the last few years.
Well, Joe, so I'll have his say later. First of all, I want to hear from you.
So, it was very good to hear Tony's introduction, because I think if I were to crystallise what our interoperability message is all about, it's all around cost reduction, simplification and choice. Fundamentally, that's what we're trying to achieve by bringing together two platform operating systems, which are Windows and Linux, so that our customers and IT departments around the world are able to deploy it in a lower risk way at a lower cost, and obviously make their lives less stressful rather than more stressful. And given that the IDC and Gartner data both indicate that Windows and Linux are the growing platforms in the industry, it would seem sensible that those are the two areas that we invest to deliver go-forward value, because not only are our customers selecting it, but also the independent software vendors are looking at those two platforms as their primary platform supporting workloads and applications onto. So as a go-forward strategy, I think it makes a lot of sense. And a lot of people are looking perhaps at their legacy Unix estate and trying to determine whether they migrate that towards a Windows infrastructure going forward or towards a Linux infrastructure going forward. So why did we get together then? Well, I think it's an important question because a lot of people are somewhat surprised with our relationship, which I might add has been going now since November 2006. So we're not in the early phases of this.
It's about time you showed up here and explained yourself. Yeah.
But fundamentally, even as far back as 2006, when we were looking at data centers to understand what was being deployed, it was pretty obvious then that there was already a real heterogeneous mix of IT solutions being rolled out. And the interesting thing from our point of view was that 69% of those surveyed were actually running both Windows and Linux together. And that was a huge catalyst, really, I think, as a reason why the two companies got together. And fundamentally, customers are the ones that drive our behavior. It's not something that we determine based on our own, purely on our own ambitions. Customers who are ultimately spending money with our companies are the ones that will drive that. So it was customers that said, we need to address this issue. Fundamentally, we're taking on the onerous overhead of managing Windows and Linux together. We want support from Microsoft, and we want support from somebody in the open source world to really make that whole process a lot easier. So if I think then about, well, what were those requirements that people asked of us, these were the drivers that fundamentally pushed us to sign this agreement and work together. And we start out really by just trying to make Windows and Linux work better together in the data center. That's a fundamental tenet of everything that we've been doing subsequently. And that comes about through a number of technical efforts that we've had to do, which have taken us, some considerable time, some of those. And even today, or very recently, we're still announcing new technical deliverables as a result of the agreement. It's an ongoing program of technical innovation. But the areas where we've concentrated initially have been around virtualization, have been around systems management technologies, these sorts of things. So it addresses very much the areas that you referred to as being some of the biggest challenges relating to a modern data center. For some customers, IP issues in relation to Linux have also been a challenge. For others, it's not, they don't necessarily get too concerned because they believe the open source community can effectively protect itself. But in order to allow that choice to be available to everybody, we felt that we needed to try and find a way where we could take that objection and that challenge away for potential customers of Microsoft and Novell. So we need to find a way to collaborate around IP issues. Support is the key thing when it comes to any technology. How you actually get your support has proven to be somewhat of a bugbear in the past. And we wanted to deliver a unified support on a global basis which offered an enterprise class service, fundamentally where you could ring up both Novell and or Microsoft to get support, whether it be for Windows or for SUSE Linux. And you get that manageability through one interface effectively. Customers don't want to be worrying about which number do I ring today or who's got the ball. It's all about when I raise my hand and say I've got a problem, I know it's going to get fixed. And then finally, all of this effort has to result in a cost reduction. If we're going to bring in these technologies, we're doing it because we need to simplify our IT and we need to do it for less cost. Straight to your point, I think today it's never been any more prevalent because of what's been going on economically. So we could say perhaps we were ahead of the game in some regard. We certainly didn't predict what was going to happen 3 years later. But fundamentally, the benefits that customers get from this agreement are actually very relevant in today's climate for IT management.
You took a bit of stick at the time when the agreement came from the open source community for making this agreement with Microsoft. Did that set you back?
Well, we obviously, it was pretty revolutionary at the time. People were surprised that Microsoft and an open source vendor could get together in the way that we did, and there was a lot of vocal blogging and information available via the web. that that really held some pretty strong views that this would be detrimental to the open source movement. Fundamentally, the net result 3 years on, and that's the best way to assess whether it was good or bad. 3 years on, we now see a scenario where Novell and Microsoft are now collaborating together, so that even Microsoft are actually developing and delivering source code into the open source Linux distribution. And maybe if we could ask Joes, maybe you could comment on that, because fundamentally that this is something, I guess, that's very very recent, right?
Yes, Joe.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's really what's happening here is over the couple of years working with Novell, working with the customers, we've learned to embrace the open source model. And there are times where we feel like it makes sense for us to work with the open source community in developing software. So, as you are all probably familiar, just about a week and a half ago, we made the announcement about the integration components, and that is just one example of Microsoft making some leaps and bounds in this area. So, we do believe that there is a way for us to work together, both from an interoperability perspective as well as from pure software development perspective, and we'll be continuing to make those investments.
Okay, thanks, Joe. At the time when you released those lines of Windows kernel code, one of the comments from the Linux community was, "Hell has frozen over." So it takes a while for some people to come round, if they will ever accept this. But what you're saying is, from your point of view, you're responding to what people are asking for practically.
Exactly. And I think the outcome of our agreement has been simply to address concerns that customers have raised all the way along. It's not something that we ventured into without actually having a clear customer mandate.
Okay, so let's have a look what you did.
So we focused around 3 key areas, and I'm not going to go through in detail all of these areas. I think everybody out there can read that for themselves. But we focused on a technology collaboration where we bring together some technical components to add value around running Linux and Windows together. For example, our bidirectional virtualization model, which allows us to run SUSE Linux optimized on top of Microsoft Hyper-V, and conversely to run Windows on top of the Linux Zen hypervisor. We also have standards-based management, which basically take advantage of web services open standards for managing both Windows and Linux. And fundamentally, we're trying to get to a point where we have a single pane of glass to manage both Windows and Linux in the data center. So there's a whole bunch of things that we did initially, but as I said earlier, this is an ongoing collaboration. So even though we focused on these first 4 on that list, we've subsequently introduced Silverlight capabilities. We've introduced a new management pack for System Center together with Microsoft for managing Linux servers from the System Center console. So it's an ongoing initiative that we continue to invest in and continue to deliver value around. We also address the intellectual property area by having an IP collaboration, which fundamentally is a covenant not to sue both of our customers on any potential patent litigation that may occur in the future around Linux and Windows patents. So customers are protected, and as I said, for most people in the open source world, this isn't really a major issue. But for some customers, their legal departments have blocked their choice of open source technology because that hadn't historically been resolved, and I think we've addressed that very well. And then the third area is a business collaboration. So we go to market together with Microsoft. We're basically delivering services from Novell around SUSE Linux subscriptions, but Microsoft is selling those subscriptions subsidized to end users. And a lot of customers have taken advantage of that around the world as a low-cost way of getting into the idea of deploying Linux and open source technology in their business. So where are we at? We're now 2.5, almost 3 years through our agreement. So far, we've had over 350 customers globally sign up to this agreement, large and small. Of the original investment that was made, $210 million have already been consumed by our customers around subsidizing the use of Linux in their data center. So that fundamentally means those subscriptions are lower price. And for us...
How much more of that subsidy is there?
So the original agreement was $240 million.
Mm-hmm.
So
it's nearly all gone.
You could argue that, yes. Obviously, once it's all gone, then there is still benefit that customers get from the technical integration. But given that this has proven to be a very successful program, we announced at the end of last year that we would add an additional $100 million to that pot of money because we want to keep the program going. It's been very successful for us. So there is an additional pot of money available effectively for people to take advantage of. So we've seen UK customers as well taking advantage of this, both large and small, as I've said. And I wanted to just put up a few names here in terms of the types of organisations that have taken advantage of interoperability. Obviously, there's big brands like ITV. They're a very large customer of ours that have taken advantage of this agreement. But at the other end of the spectrum, we also have very small organisations who are absolutely reliant on IT to be able to be in business. And an example there is iwantoneofthose.com, who fundamentally rely on that IT service, otherwise they can't trade. And it's equally important to them that they get good service, good support, and can take advantage of the economic benefits attributable to these subsidised subscriptions. So that was really all I wanted to do, just to bring the introduction in.
That's good, because I think it's good at this point to bring in Frank and Jose down the line from various parts of the States to fill us in on a bit more of the technical detail about what actually happens in this. So guys, are you there?
Yes, we're here.
That's a relief. Well, it's over to you.
Great. Thank you, Tony and Tim, and thank you, Steve. This is Frank Rigo from Novell, and as Tony mentioned, I'll dive a little bit deeper into some of the tactical solutions that we're delivering for customers here, both here in North America and in EMEA. And as Steve has already mentioned, very few of the data centers today contain only one type of server. The vast majority of our customers contain a mix of systems. And our customers have told us that they want the freedom not only to consolidate their server holdings, but also mix and match software in that consolidation process. So running Windows and Linux virtual machines on the same server, of course, helps data centers more efficiently utilize their server resources and gain more flexibility in solving their business problems. And with the advent of virtualization capability integrated into the operating system, our customers are looking to reduce costs by leveraging their existing infrastructure versus implementing a third-party virtualization solution. So the technical collaboration between Microsoft and Novell, as Steve has already mentioned, has resulted in technologies that make it possible for customers to host virtual machines running SUSE Linux Enterprise Server on top of Windows Server 2008 using Hyper-V, and conversely to run virtual machines running Windows Server 2008 on top of SUSE Linux Enterprise Server using Xen Hypervisor technology. And specifically, we had to do some engineering work to get that to happen. Microsoft and Novell worked together to develop virtual machine adapters and drivers that facilitate that communication between Hyper-V and the Xen hypervisors and the guest operating systems to allow those guest operating systems to run at full para-virtualized performance levels. And today, SUSE Linux Enterprise Server is the only Linux OS that fully supports or is fully supported on Microsoft's Hyper-V, and is currently the only validated Linux OS via Microsoft's SVVP certification for hosting Windows Server 2008 guests. And Joe's already mentioned the announcement last week from Microsoft regarding the release of the Linux integration components for Hyper-V to the open source community under the GPL v2 license. So those are the components that allow Linux to run as an optimized guest on Hyper-V. And at Novell...
Sounds ominous.
That's not encouraging, is it? Are you there, Frank? We've lost Frank.
Are you guys still there?
Ah, yes. Now, yeah. Now you're there. You dropped out for a minute.
So we were talking about the Linux integration components, but we worked with Microsoft and provided guidance and feedback to Microsoft's Open Source Technology Center, enabled their team to contribute the code in such a way that was acceptable by the Linux kernel community. And again, at Novell, we truly applaud that move by Microsoft We're excited about the participation in the open source community, and I think it really exemplifies the benefits of our partnership. And I'd like to quickly mention that at the end of the presentation, we'll introduce a proof of concept offer that's making it very easy for our customers to try out SUSE Linux Enterprise Server running on Hyper-V. And I wanted to see if, Joe, if you had any flavor on the virtualization collaboration.
Yeah, just one comment. Overall, the response from our customer base has been very positive. On the Microsoft front, of course, we believe that Windows Server is a great platform and a great hypervisor. But from a customer perspective, we wanted to make sure that both Windows and Linux can run as first-class citizens with the same level of performance that you would see if you were just running in an all-Windows environment. And we believe through this collaboration with Novell, through the work on the integration components, that we've been able to accomplish that. And as Frank mentioned, we're willing to help prove that out to you through this proof of concept offer as well. So we'll hear more about that toward the end.
Joe, it's Tim here. Can I just quickly ask you something? There's a question for a few months ago. I seem to remember seeing announcements from Microsoft talking about working with Red Hat on something similar. How does that compare?
Yeah, so on the Red Hat front, we have struck an agreement for support purposes, which is very different from the multi-dimensional relationship we have with Novell. Mm-hmm. When you consider what we've done with Novell, we are jointly developing code, we're jointly bringing solutions to market, and we are working together in a joint lab. On the Red Hat front, it was really more about validating each other's hypervisors so our guest operating systems can work on each other's platform. And so it's really a support contract so that customers that will be looking to run Red Hat on Windows or vice versa will be in a supported environment, but the investment stops there. There is no intellectual property component there or any other joint development outside of that. Okay. And the final comment on the Red Hat piece that I'll make is, that validation is still yet to be completed. So today, Novell really is the only endorsed and supported Linux on Windows.
Okay, thanks for that. Frank, I'll let you carry on.
So, yeah, thank you. So one of the biggest challenges in a mixed environment, as we've already mentioned, of course, is the systems management piece. And in a heterogeneous data center, you often require unique separate tools for administrative tasks and monitoring at additional costs. And each management tool may require unique IT skills, as Steve and Tony have pointed out. Our customers are often running important infrastructure servers on their Linux servers. And when those services such as OpenLDAP, Samba, or the firewall are interrupted, or when one of those servers fails, it can take hours for IT managers to diagnose and fix the problem. So what they're really looking for is a way to be proactively notified of performance and health issues. And the way that most customers solve this today is to have two separate sets of tools and expertise, one for Windows and one for Linux. So again, the work that we've done with Microsoft extends into the systems management area. And in June of this year, we released a management pack that allows Windows systems administrators to monitor their SUSE Linux Enterprise servers from within Operations Manager 2007, right from the same console. The management pack builds on the Open Standards WS Management and Open Pegasus work that we've been collaborating on, and extends Microsoft's new cross-platform extensions feature that's shipping with Operations Manager 2007 R2. So where Microsoft enabled monitoring of Linux CPU, disk, and network health, we've added the ability to monitor, diagnose, start, stop, restart a number of essential Linux services like Samba, DNS, DHCP, LDAP, CUPS, NFS, and Firewall. The management pack installs very easily, is integrated right into the Ops Manager menu so that it's completely seamless for Windows administrators. And that's really the point, to be able to manage your Linux and your Windows from a single pane of glass.
There's one question that's come in here, Frank, that's relevant at this point. It's just come in. Someone's saying, isn't this really more about Novell trying to tie up market share rather than embracing the concept of open source? Is this a land grab on your part?
I think as Steve mentioned very early in in the presentation, our main goal here is to listen to what our customers are saying and to respond. And our customers, at the outset, we're saying we want our Windows and our Linux systems to work better together. The fact is that many of the customers that we go into are already Windows customers. In fact, that by default, they're Windows customers that are looking to deploy Linux. And so many of them have made the investment already in System Center tools. And what we're simply doing is saying, look, we're not forcing you to make an additional investment in a Linux tool infrastructure. What we'd like to do is to fit into your existing infrastructure, plug into Operations Manager, save you some money, and allow you to manage both systems from the same console. Novell has a competitive systems management line in ZenWorks, but what we're saying is our customers are running Operations Manager in many of these places. We'd like to fit in with what they're doing.
Okay, I think that question probably came in from another Linux distributor or something.
And I don't think we should be embarrassed or shy about the fact that we might ultimately end up making a little bit more money out of this. We are a commercial venture at the end of the day, and one of the challenges around any open source software vendor is how do you monetize and commercialize open source technology so that you can run a profitable business. So if we take more market share as a result and we create more competition and more openness and more choice for customers, why is that a bad thing? I think that that's clearly a benefit that everybody can take advantage of.
Okay, Frank, over to you.
Yeah, so another of the key areas that we're addressing with this technical collaboration is identity interoperability. Microsoft customers utilize Active Directory in Windows as the foundation of their identity infrastructure. But in a heterogeneous environment where companies are looking to collaborate across departments and even separate partner or customer organizations, Active Directory may be only one of the identity stores. And there's often a need to extend access to users, for example, in eDirectory or in iPlanet or some other LDAP-compliant identity store. So our technical collaboration with Microsoft in the directory and identity area has resulted in both companies adopting web service standards in our respective products and utilizing things like WS Security, WS Federation, WS Trust to provide a secure and simple way to federate identities from any LDAP directory into a Microsoft Active Directory-based web service. Now, a great example of this is how we provide simplified access to SharePoint for businesses that want to use SharePoint as a collaboration environment for multiple organizations using multiple identity stores. Now, SharePoint uses Active Directory as its front end, and as a result of the collaboration partnership with Microsoft, Access Manager from Novell now supports WS Federation, giving users a secure way to pass authentication information to Windows environments using Active Directory Federation services. Access Manager also supports SAML and Liberty Alliance Identity Federation standards, so minimizing or even eliminating interoperability issues among external partners or internal work groups. So the bottom line for the SharePoint administrator is that they no longer have to move around and manage individual identities for all users that need to access to SharePoint. Those identities can be managed by the organization that owns them, and they can simply use Access Manager as a single sign-on tool for SharePoint.
Tony, I see you writing.
Again,
sorry.
Yes,
Sorry, Joseph, I didn't mean to talk over you.
No, I was just going to say this is a good illustration of how Microsoft and Novell are working, to provide real value to the customer. We've taken the technologies in the broad view and are now providing real tactical solutions that our customers can deploy and make life easier and save money.
Yeah. I think it's a good point there that you made, that it's a tactical solution, because all businesses really operate by doing tactical things that give them an immediate benefit. And in the entire area of identity management generally, it's still at a pretty basic level in many organizations, and there have been lots of problems putting things together. So anything that makes that easier for organizations to basically exploit to secure things, but also to make their daily routine management tools and processes more effective and efficient, has to be beneficial to everybody.
But to have something like this, Tony, it makes it much more attractive to develop a hybrid environment using sort of best-of-breed technology.
It takes a lot of
Linux
pain
or
out.
Windows, yeah.
And avoiding pain is a big issue, particularly in the current environment where, as we said earlier, resources are not there, and finding really skilled resources to do this sort of integration from scratch between different platforms is frequently enough to stop people doing anything at all.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Frank, back to you.
Great. So we've talked about a few of the areas of technical collaboration, but a major part of the value of this relationship, at least in our customers' eyes, is the support partnership between Microsoft and Novell. For Novell, support is a concept that we understand very well. After all, as you pointed out earlier, Linux is free and open source software, and so the value that we provide is really enterprise-level support. The complexity of the problem increases significantly, however, when technologies from two or more vendors are tightly integrated to provide a solution like we're doing. And so a coordinated support effort in those situations is an absolute requirement. But oftentimes the vendors are not set up to interact, or they're unfamiliar with the other vendor's technology and the way that it interfaces with their product. So in these cases, the customer is left dangling in the middle. So as a result of the collaboration agreement between Microsoft and Novell, we've entered into a cooperative support agreement that provides a process and a mechanism of collaboration between the companies for supporting our mutual customers. And the relationship allows for a clearly defined support process. It allows for escalation points so that Microsoft and Novell can collaborate all the way up through our engineering organizations to provide quick responses on support issues and guaranteed response times for diagnosing or troubleshooting and resolving customer issues. So what this all means is that when a customer who has a valid support agreement with Novell and Microsoft has an issue, they can call either Microsoft or Novell, and they're guaranteed a response time within the time frame set by whatever their existing support agreement is. So joint Microsoft Novell customers running SUSE Linux Enterprise and Windows Server together in a virtualized environment enjoy a unique and critical advantage in enterprise-level support.
How does that work in practice, guys? Does it? Is there not the danger that a customer's going to phone one of you up and get the response, oh, we don't do that bit, you have to call the other one? How do you hand these things off?
Yeah, I think that is the customer concern when they're dealing with two vendors with products that have to integrate so tightly together. And the very reason that we entered into this support agreement is to avoid that situation. So we have a relationship in the back end where the customer can call either Microsoft or Novell, and our support organizations are actually hooked together through an agreement so that we can do warm handoff of issues between support organizations with all of the data necessary, and the customer can call Microsoft or Novell, but at the end of the day, Microsoft and Novell are working together behind the scenes to resolve the customer issue. So for us, it doesn't matter. As long as he has a valid support agreement with both companies, it doesn't matter whether he calls Microsoft or Novell.
Okay.
And I'll close on this slide and then hand it back to Steve. But a very important part of our collaboration is the existence of the Interoperability Lab in Cambridge, Massachusetts. The lab has a rather unique setup with Novell and Microsoft employees literally working side by side in a data center that includes Windows and SUSE Linux servers and all of the technology that we're jointly developing. In addition to validating and optimizing the interop solutions, one of the main benefits of the lab for our customers is the ability for our joint team, again, to quickly diagnose and fix customer support issues because you have both teams working in close proximity with each other with all of the hardware, software, and expertise in that one location. And at this point, I'd like to give it back to Steve to talk about our expanded support offering.
Thanks, Frank.
Right, Steve, I'm going to ask you to whiz through the last little bit of the support thing, because then we leave time for some of the questions, a lot of questions.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I recognise it's important that we have the opportunity to answer some questions. So I just wanted to make sure everybody understood that what we were offering around our expanded support, which is a new extension to our agreement with Microsoft. Fundamentally, we're delivering today a mechanism where customers who are trying to consolidate, in this case, multiple Linux distributions, I should say, they're trying to consolidate them down to one distribution to simplify the way they manage their IT. And because of the way Linux has grown up in a lot of organizations, there was often not a policy about how that was introduced at the beginning. And now, today, companies recognize the value they're getting from Linux and want to effectively make that a professional choice It should be then something that which becomes part of their IT standards. So consolidation, standardization is a key activity, but the real challenge about how you do that is that you can't rush it. You need to have a plan. You need to have a mechanism to transition from one platform to another in a controlled way, because you can't simply switch off one particular distribution and turn on another the next day and carry on. So we now offer the expanded support capability, which fundamentally says if somebody takes a subscription from Microsoft and Novell, they also get, in addition to the support for their SUSE Linux subscription, the ability to support a Red Hat subscription as well. And that gives priority level support, 24/7, our best quality level of support, for an existing Red Hat estate as well, for a period of 3 years, which we feel is more than adequate for most cases to migrate workloads from one platform to another and allow companies then to consolidate and standardize around one particular flavor of Linux. So that's really the offer, and as I say, that's a standard component now within our portfolio. So right at the beginning, we highlighted what some of the things were that people were asking for, customers were asking for, and why we got together with Microsoft to deliver this. So again, I'm not going to cover this. It's really by way of a summary, just to sort of put into context each of the things that we've highlighted today against each of those requirements that were asked for at the beginning. And I think we've done a pretty good job to address those concerns that customers raise with us. And as I said, this is an ongoing collaboration. We don't stop simply because we fulfilled these initial requirements. We're finding new ways. You know, there are probably something like 60 proposed projects that we could do. Whether we do them all is another matter. It's a function of resources and time and money. But ultimately, there's a lot of good things that we can still collaborate on together with Microsoft to continue to add value and deliver value for our customers. So that was it in terms of my piece. So,
Tony, yes, this is what people should be doing right now.
It's the usual sort of slide that we have to wrap things up.
Yeah.
It's where to start, how can we begin, what's the first steps to take.
Mm-hmm.
And again, the feedback that we've had are the simple, obvious stuff that's so obvious that many people don't actually have the time to do it, because it's almost an administrative function, and that's, know what business applications you're actually using out there and what their relevant importance is. Once you know what's out there, who's using it, why they're using it, then you've got that base of knowledge that you can put everything else around.
So we've got one comment here that's saying it's not about, this sort of thing shouldn't be about cost reduction, it's finding the best stuff to do the job.
Yeah, exactly. Unfortunately, a lot of businesses at the moment, though, are very heavily focusing on the cost side. But in essence, you can only cut costs so far. Ultimately, businesses are actually about delivering additional value. So it's finding the best things that fit the business, that the business can afford. Sometimes that means compromises have to be made. But without that core base of understanding of what the business is trying to do in the first place and how it's trying to do it now, it's very hard to move forward.
Yeah.
So get that platform of knowledge that you need to actually work out where to go next and how to start.
and if you could do both, then it obviously becomes even more compelling.
Yep.
You get double benefit.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And once you know what the business actually is doing now, find out what the business really needs to do, because it's not unknown for many IT organisations to actually be running some stuff that's not actually being used by very many people, if at all. So you might have what looks to be initially a problematic application that you can't migrate off of whatever platform it's currently running on to wherever you want to go to, only to find out that, frankly, nobody's actually using it. So you can begin to save yourself some money there anyway by at least taking it off the maintenance contract that it's probably on today for support. Mm-hmm. So it's the real basics of asset management coming into play here.
Okay, I've got a cracking question here that I can't wait to get into. Joe, so I'll give you this one to you, if you're there. Someone says, it sounds like you want to make SUSE Linux the Windows of Linux distros. Are both partners committed to maintaining open source status of all components developed on top? Or are you going to tie up the drivers, etc.? Joe, if you could take that one first, and then maybe I can give it to Steve or Frank as well.
On the Microsoft side, I think that one's a little bit hard to answer just because we're not sure of what the future holds here. Our intention is to continue to work to make sure that both platforms interoperate well and continue to provide the best experience for customers. But whether or not all the components will be open source or not is yet to be determined.
Okay. What do you say to this, Steve?
Yeah, I pretty much agree there. I think, fundamentally, we can't dictate, because it's a partnership at the end of the day. We can't dictate what will happen with all of that technology. But I think, future activity is always indicated by past activity. And we're already seeing a greater openness and delivery of some of those technologies into the open source sphere. And who's to say that we won't continue with that trend? I think if we'd never done it, then you could argue that maybe it never happened. But a big piece of ice has been broken here by making that move last week.
Okay, but no promises at the moment on that, no.
I suspect there are lawyers involved somewhere along the line.
They usually are, Tony. Yeah. Also, Joe's for this one, another question coming in. It's separate but related. Can you fill us in on any more plans that Microsoft has to release any more of its code to open source? Is this something now that's got momentum within Microsoft?
I would say that this is not the first time we've worked with the open source community in doing something like this. Probably one of the more significant milestones. But there are plans to continue working with the community and to make other contributions as well. I can't highlight specifically which ones, but we do have a website which is just Port 25, which is a website that Microsoft has set up. It's been available for some time. It showcases our involvement in some of the different open source projects and work with the open source community. So I would just refer folks to there. But, in a short answer, the answer is yes, we plan to continue doing this where it makes sense. I don't have any specifics, though.
Okay, thanks very much. We got there's a lot of people that have chipped in on the skills thing. Can you fill us in a little bit more on how you think we're going to bring some more trained people through? Also, some people doubting that really we need Linux skills, we need Linux application skills instead. But especially because we spend a bit of our time talking about medium-sized and even smaller businesses here. It's going to take a while, isn't it?
I think like any technology emerging, it takes time to fill out the full plethora of skills and technical awareness that are required to really address that momentum shift. But I think where we look at from a Linux perspective, the Linux has been in the enterprise now for close on 10 years, and those skills are filtering out, and certainly the bigger vendors, the bigger customers, I should say, are the ones where those skills have really been honed. All we can do as a distribution vendor is to make available training classes not only for our customers but also for the consulting companies that are looking to develop those skills, so that they can help propagate that knowledge throughout the industry. That's really the way that we try and address it in our humble way. But there are a lot of other companies out there that sell Linux training capabilities purely as their primary source of income. So it's a case of you have to take on a little bit of the training perhaps through our free online training courses initially, and then build up those skills over time.
The interesting point, though, is very much that everything's driven by the application. Almost nobody, in fact, nobody runs an operating system just because they want to run an operating system. It all comes down to the applications that are being used by business people as part of their daily jobs that matter. So the point there about actually having the application skills being more important than the platform skills is certainly one element, particularly for smaller and mid-sized businesses, where maybe actually offloading the management in some sort of managed service of the platform itself, so allowing the business to focus on the real value generators, i.e. exploiting the applications, might be the way that things are going to develop more and more in the future.
And there is one very important point which is coming up, which is fundamentally the application vendors are looking for ways for their customers to consume their technology in a much more readily acceptable way. So application virtualization is a way to do that. And a lot of the bigger vendors are now really exploring that and delivering their applications as virtual applications effectively to help reduce some of the overheads of deploying and maintaining those applications in a mixed IT environment.
Okay, guys, there's a lot more to discuss about this, but we are out of time. There's a few more questions, and Novell or Microsoft or this, I suppose you're Bamzilla now, aren't you, now that you're sort of moulded together, will be able to answer any outstanding questions that you've got. Is that okay? It shouldn't take you too long. And but we do have to wrap up now. Steve and Tony in the studio, and Frank and Joe down the line. Thank you very much for your involvement today and for all your help. And guys, thank you very much for watching. Remember to give us your feedback. Tell us what you liked and didn't like. But from me, Tim Phillips, and from our Regcast today, goodbye.